Welcome back, everybody, to Sip and Rip. It's Saturday today, about noon. I have a wedding to go to today in a bit, so I'm going to be tired in the morning. So I thought, why not record the Sip and Rip on Saturday? We're going to talk about a couple of things today. South of the border focus, obviously. We have the budget coming in Canada next week. So next week, Sip and Rip will probably cover a lot of that, even though we will talk about it on the show as well. There's going to be a lot, but let's start. Man, the food stamps thing in the States, the SNAP benefits, I think they're called. This graphic is crazy. All right. We've talked a lot on the show about immigration over the years, but to see a graphic like this is for people on audio. Food stamp use by ethnicity: 45.6% Afghan, 42.4% Somali, 34.8% Iraqi, and 23.3% Haitian. And the headline is immigrants have become very dependent on SNAP. I would argue that this is the case everywhere in the modern world. We're seeing this reported in data in places like Europe already, where you find out that after 10 years, immigrants just aren't working. They're having tons of kids who are all reliant on the government. They're wards of the state, basically, except when it comes to culture. They keep the barbaric culture from which they came, but take the money from the state from which they are now calling home. It's a disaster. I would love to see the school scores, standardized testing scores amongst this population too. I'd love to see the obesity numbers. I'd love to see any number of statistics related to these people. And Kat's heard, obviously, with the quote here, you work 80 hours a week for this. It is insane. Canada, obviously in a similar boat, though we don't call it SNAP, the number of dollars immigrants get is unfathomable and honestly perverse and embarrassing. Let's listen to one of my favorites, Adam Carolla, talk about SNAP recipients here.
I was reading that SNAP's going to run out, and 40 million people are going to go.
40 million.
40 million. Okay, listen to me, everybody. This whole thing of like 40 million people are going to go hungry. First off, those 40 million people average an extra 40 pounds on them over the average working American. If you took the average person that's on SNAP getting free food and the average person that gets no free food from the government, the average female who gets no free food from the government is 146 pounds. The average SNAP recipient is 211 pounds. So is it a food? I know. First off, we talk about going hungry. Nobody could benefit from a nice fast more than the SNAP recipient.
It's spot on. This is, to me, so telling. You're told all the time that SNAP is this thing that people need to survive and they need it because they can't afford food or whatever. That's bullshit. Everyone's seen the videos, the stuff that's SNAP eligible, Uber Eats and DoorDash, lobster tails on Amazon grocery. I am of the opinion, this is one of my harsher opinions, honestly. I'm of the opinion that people who are on any kind of government support should not be given money, but should be sent like chicken, rice, and broccoli. They should be drug tested. They should be alcohol tested. Like, you're not living the high life on the back of the taxpayer. You're surviving until you can find a way to flourish. And if that makes me, racist, bigoted, whatever, then so be it. I think it's obvious that there's problems with all this stuff. And the obvious problem, of course, is that all these people who are taking SNAP benefits are either taking full advantage of it or just getting fat and not interested, they don't have any interest in bettering their situation. This one from Governor Tim Walz, my favorite. Every $1 invested in SNAP generates $1.80 in economic activity. It's not about the money. Trump just wants Americans to go hungry. What a retard. This guy thinks that if we just give $1 to SNAP, it generates $1.80 in economic activity. Obviously not true. And Geiger, pointing this out. What if we just invest $10 trillion in SNAP? Well, to his point, this guy was almost the vice president. I'll remind you that Governor Walz got on stage and admitted he had no assets, no equities, no real estate investment, none of that, and wore it like a badge of honor among the left. I suppose it is. To be poor and retarded seems to be something that the left values. Just ask New Yorkers. And then, of course, he also said that investing in Tesla was a bad idea. I won't bring up the stock chart. You can have a look and see how it's performed since then. Tim Walz will leave no mark in history, while Elon will be regarded as one of the probably great people of the first 2,000 or so years of this planet. So there you go. Yet another idiot. Let's move on to our buddy Bill. Bill Gates thinks climate change is a serious problem, but says it's time to focus on fighting poverty and preventing disease. This is an incredible about face. We spent years, decades at this point, talking about global warming as the key issue. Climate change is the key issue of our time. We've had people from Obama to AOC to some on the right, regardless of country, talk about just how important it is to basically destroy your economy, destroy your way of life to prevent climate change. And now Bill obviously has changed his tune on that quite a bit in some comments made before the recent, I think the COP conference, maybe? You should call it the COPE conference, honestly. But anyhow, a doomsday outlook has led the climate community to focus too much on near-term goals to reduce emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases that cause warming, diverting resources away from the most effective things that can be done to improve life in a warming world, Gates said. In a memo released Tuesday, Gates also said the world's primary goal should instead be to prevent suffering, particularly for those in the toughest conditions in the world's poorest countries. I don't have the minutes or the note that he wrote, but in the note, he basically says, yeah, is it true that global warming will kill a number of people? Yes. But what if we assume that that same number of people benefit greatly from technological advancement that comes from, you know, what he doesn't say is fossils and renewable energy and nuclear, but, you know, he means that. And so I think it's no coincidence that as we move into this era of nuclear energy, the green climate stuff is going to fall by the wayside, not because people don't believe in it. I think there's still a lot of hopefuls out there, but I think the big thing is that you can't run huge data centers, which are obviously going to become a need, on, you know, wind turbines. It doesn't work. You're going to need nuclear, and many people, excuse me, in the nuclear space have been saying this for a long time. Bitcoiners obviously been saying this for a long time, and of course, Microsoft, Amazon, and others are buying nuclear facilities to power their data centers. They're not waiting for government approval. So you can go read this, 17 pages. Pretty funny that Bill, of all people, has abandoned this. There's a lot of people who have made this their personality, including Germany. Here's a tweet from Dario Cox, CPX, obviously not COX. Wonder why Germany is heading towards a crisis similar to Greece 13 years ago? Because real government debt is 130% of GDP, not 65. During the weekend, a friend of mine claimed how German debt is still low and the country has room to absorb 900 billion of spending that will mostly be channeled to the military. However, it couldn't explain why he sees signs of financial strains all around Germany. The answer is that you're not aware that Germany has more than 1 trillion euro in debt at state and federal agencies, with government guarantees not being included in the official public debt calculation. This is the case in Canada too. We've heard different ministers over the last 10 years especially talk about how our debt to GDP is among some of the best in the world. We don't factor in the entitlement spending that we have to do. So provincially, you're talking about healthcare and pensions, municipally pensions as well, and then of course federally pensions and other entitlement spending. We don't count those as balance sheet debits, credits. So I'm having a brain fart here, but the idea behind all this is that debt to GDP is a flawed metric, even in the best of times, because, you know, there's ways to spin what debt is. And one of the ways this is done is, as the tweet mentions, it doesn't add municipal, provincial, and federal pension liabilities, for example. These are huge numbers, and this might be the only thing that matters. You know, we've often talked on the show, and we're not the only ones, about the way that we're going to know that the state is having an issue maintaining legitimacy and power. And one of the big ones, obviously, is the social safety net is going to start to fail. I believe it already has. I think that the retirement, unfortunately, unless you're a Bitcoiner, retirement is going to be a maybe 1.5 generation phenomenon. The boomers and the Gen Xers might get it, but broadly, I think a lot of people my age and younger are going to work until they die or be on some kind of UBI, you know, golden brick road to serfdom. Interesting stuff here anyway, that Germany is starting to think about these things. And then, of course, Germany, Europe's growing tumor, from Michael Nicoletos, M. Nicoletos on Twitter. There's a lot of good data here. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll try and summarize it. The euro obviously having trouble because Germany's not producing. Germany made Europe entirely dependent on one supplier, Russian oil and gas. Obviously, that's not going well. In the name of global warming, which I mentioned earlier, is not going to carry forward by the looks of things. In the name of global warming, which then changed to climate change, Germany backed CO2 emission credits, destroyed European heavy industry. Germany enforced brutal austerity on Greece, causing a depression worse than the Great Depression. And now Germany demands a huge spending plan to address its own economic woes. You know, the Greece thing was like 10 years ago. It wasn't that long. And now you have Germany basically saying the same thing. Unelected Brussels politicians run Europe with their own agendas. There's no such thing as the Eurozone. It's a failure. We've talked about this a bunch on the program. If you listen to CBP, you know that I have strong feelings about the Eurozone. I think it's a complete failure from a democracy standpoint, a culture standpoint, and of course, an economic standpoint, all of which I think are basically fracturing at the same time here in a very public way. It's embarrassing. The European Union should be embarrassed by the way that it's carried itself over the last decade or so. And I think for people who still think the Eurozone has a backbone or can last into the future, I would ask why. Why do you think that? Again, your industrial base is completely hollowed out. You have no military. Donald Trump is dictating terms to you on trade, even though you're quote unquote the most important economic union in the world. It turns out you're just a completely flaccid, spineless joke. And everyone is seeing this now, including, it seems to me, Europeans for the first time. Virtue signaling no longer something that they can worry about. So maybe if they want to leave, they can expect to see a wealth tax. The UK starting to entertain what they're calling a settling up charge when they leave, which is hilarious. In the story here, I have it archived. I'll put this in the notes. It's an exit tax. We've discussed this on CBP over the years, and we're not the only ones who've talked about an exit tax. The fourth turning requires that governments try to stop capital from leaving their jurisdiction, because if you don't, inevitably and invariably, the increasing dystopia and increasing levels of dystopia and the overt theft through taxes of the most productive people to support, as we mentioned earlier, food stamp recipients and other bullshit like this, people will just leave. And the idea is that you have to discourage people from leaving by taking everything they've earned on the way out. It's completely ridiculous, but it's going to become the norm. The idea that a country, it's funny that the idea behind this, like if you ask a proponent of the exit tax or the settling tax or whatever they want to call it in all these communist nightmares, excuse me, if you ask somebody what the idea behind this is, it's that the jurisdiction from which this person is fleeing enabled the business success of that person, and so they should have to pay on the way out to thank, I guess, the country in a way. The thing is that this is no longer true. Many of the biggest success stories in Europe and Canada, the UK here, obviously, the biggest success stories are actually now developing in spite of the best efforts of those nations to slow them down. Anywhere where you see a left-leaning government, it's socialist policy, it's communist leanings, it's tax the rich, it's eat the rich in some places. They can always pay 2%, 3%, 4% more, again, so that obese minorities and immigrants can be 50 pounds heavier than their working counterparts. I can't express my distaste and disgust for this with words that are suited for sharing on the internet, but you can imagine how I feel about this. This is going to be a disaster. And this is why Bitcoin's important, by the way. It's easy to take some money out of people's bank accounts or based on their tax returns. If you're a Bitcoin holder and not a seller, you don't have any tax claims or capital gains to pay, capital losses to claim, whatever. Those 12 words are going to be very important to you when you try and leave the UK, Canada, any number of other places. I would expect to see Canada try something similar, by the way. So just keep that in mind as we head into the end of a budget-free life here in the Great White North. Anyway, don't forget to check out the sponsors, EasyDNS, 256 Heat, and Bull Bitcoin, the best places to do all the things that those guys do. And until next time, friends, take care of yourselves.